Belize is one of the smallest countries in continental America, and despite being surrounded by Spanish-speaking countries, its only official language is English. Come and uncover the mysteries of one of the least known countries on the continent, and discover with us why, even though Spanish is spoken, it can't be considered a Hispanic American country. Belize is among the countries in the world with the smallest population, and is also one of the most unknown, even to its neighbors. However, the ethnic and linguistic diversity of this country is quite large in relation to its size. To understand the current linguistic situation of Belize, it is necessary to first review what has happened in this territory throughout history. The Maya civilization flourished in the region that includes the southeast of present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and the west of Honduras and El Salvador between 1500 before Christ and 300 Anno Domini. Anno Domini, and it flourished fully until around the year 1200 of our era. Later, it is believed that conflicts and internal political destabilization led to the weakening of this civilization, a civilization that still existed when the first Spanish explorers arrived at the end of the 15th century. It was then that, through the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, signed between the Catholic monarchs and the Crown of Portugal, the Spanish language was given free rein to reach all the territories of the New World explored by Spain, including, in theory, the present-day territory of Belize. However, the Spanish conquerors were not able to fully establish themselves in this region, mainly due to the lack of resources such as gold, and due to the constant hostilities and clashes caused by the resistant Maya people. This led to English pirates gradually beginning to settle along the coasts of Belize throughout the 16th century, looking for a place from which they could attack Spanish ships, until they founded the first permanent settlement in 1716 in what is now the Belize district. They were mainly attracted by loggers interested in exploiting the tree known as logwood. It was very valuable for producing dyes that were in demand by textile companies in Europe, while at the same time they imported slaves from Africa for these activities. From that moment on, the Spanish carried out numerous attacks on the new British settlements, although without definitive success, mainly due to the lack of Spanish intention to settle, so the British always managed to regain local control. These clashes between the English and the Spanish continued until 1783, when a peace treaty was signed between these two powers in Versailles, in which Spain ceded to the English a part of the territory between the Hondo and Belize rivers for logging purposes, and later, through the London Convention of 1786, the British were allowed to expand this logging activity up to the Sibun River. However, the area was still claimed in sovereignty by the Spanish, which increased bilateral political friction until a war broke out in 1796, resulting in the defeat of the Spanish at the Battle of St. George's Cay in 1798. From that moment on, Spain forever renounced any kind of claim in the area. However, Great Britain did not immediately take control of those territories, but due to internal conflicts between landowners and merchants, it was necessary to proclaim the area as a British colony, subordinate to Jamaica, under the title of British Honduras. In 1862, during the colonial period, the use and speaking of the Spanish language was prohibited, and at the same time, the so-called Belizean Creole was formed, which is considered a Creole language, based on English, but with strong influences from African languages introduced by the slaves. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell to get notified about new videos. The status of British colony lasted until 1964, the year when the colony achieved self-government status and was later renamed in 1936. In 1973, it adopted its current name, Belize, and finally became the last country on the American continent to achieve independence in 1981, 681. If you want to know more interesting facts about the history of Belize, click on this video from our friends at Historias N360. Since colonial times, Belize had become politically a predominantly English-speaking country, where Creole and other native languages also coexisted. But this changed in the 1980s after nearly 30,000 Central American war refugees arrived in the country. This gave a big boost to the number of Spanish speakers in Belize. However, this sudden change was seen as a threat among some sectors, generating rejection and alarm. Faced with the rapid growth of the Spanish language in a country that is officially English-speaking, in the 1990s, Spanish continued its accelerated growth. So much so that in 1998, the government made it the second mandatory language in secondary schools. And then, in 2000, it was introduced into the mandatory curriculum of the, for this reason, in recent decades, what is known as Belizean Spanish has developed, which has acquired features similar to Caribbean Spanish, Andalusian Spanish, and Canarian Spanish. Currently, Belize is a sovereign country, a member of the Commonwealth of Nations, and has a parliamentary constitutional monarchy system, with the King of England as the head of state. However, executive authority is exercised by the cabinet, headed by the Prime Minister, which advises the Governor General, who is the King's representative in the nation. The only official language of Belize is English, and therefore, it is its primary language, making it the only country in Central America with this characteristic. For this reason, technically speaking, it cannot be considered a Hispanic country, since only those countries that have Spanish as their primary or at least official language are considered as such. But this seems to contrast with the fact that Spanish is nowadays the second most spoken language in this country, with about 52% of its population speaking it natively or fluently, after English, which is spoken naturally. Natively by around 57% of the population, and surpassing Belizean Creole, which is spoken natively by about 40% of the inhabitants. Although used in daily life by a much larger percentage, according to data released by the Belize Institute of Statistics in 2010. Therefore, it has become a country with a high rate of bilingualism, and it is normal to speak two or even the three most spoken languages in the country. The Spanish-speaking population is mainly concentrated in the border areas with Guatemala and Mexico, that is in the districts of Cayo, Corozal, and Orange Walk. It is worth noting that, in addition, other minority languages still exist, such as Quechua Maya, Mopan Maya, Yucatec Maya, Garifuna, German introduced by Mennonite communities, and Chinese, which arrived with immigrants during the time of British Honduras. Ethnically speaking, the two predominant racial groups in the country are the Creoles, who are the descendants of enslaved Africans and the first British settlers, and the Mestizos, who are the descendants of Native Americans and Spanish settlers. 75% of the population of Belize, along with ethnic minorities of Maya Garifuna origin, a mix of Africans, slaves and Caribs, Indians, Germans, Dutch, and Chinese, among others. With all this, Spanish seems to have a promising future in Belize. In the Ministry of Education's regulation manual, it was stated that the teaching of Spanish is one of the main national goals. Additionally, in the year 2000, the University of Belize was created, and the Spanish language was included as a mandatory subject in all study programs. In the Belize Education Plan from 2021 to 2025, Spanish is considered one of the subjects in secondary schools. To implement an open educational resources project, which aims to train teachers in the development of online teaching content and to guarantee high-quality resources in school and secondary education programs for youth, out-of-school individuals, and adults. In conclusion, the cultural identity of Belizeans remains tied to their colonial past, which is why many are even proud of their indigenous and African roots, and of being an official country. Identity of Belizeans remains, and of being And that's all for today. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to this channel. I invite you to also turn on the notification bell so you get reminded when there's a new video. See you soon.